The next item is the Plaid Cymru debate on the proposed M4 relief road, and I call on Adam Price to move the motion. Thank you very much, Llywydd. It's my pleasure to rise to move the motion in the name of Rhyn ap Iorwerth, which is to do with the project, or the relief road, the M4 relief road, a new motorway in truth. That's what it is, of course. It's true to say that it is one of the infrastructure projects, the most controversial projects that we've been discussing, not only recently, but for some decades. And there is a great range of opinion in Wales, and that's reflected in this chamber. But this motion asks us not to decide today on this issue, but to ensure that there will be an opportunity for us to make a decision, so that range of views from elected members in this place can be heard, and that is that there is a democratic will that is expressed as far as the decision is concerned. Of course, we've seen throughout the time that this project has been being discussed, and you can go back to 1991 originally, where the scheme was proposed. Throughout that time, the costs have increased, partly for inflationary reasons, but even in the recent years, we've seen a significant increase in the estimates that the government itself has given for the project. That is, the First Minister just 3 years ago was talking about the fact that the cost would be significantly less than £1 billion, but we know now from the evidence from the government itself to the public inquiry that that has risen. At least, well, without including VAT, it's risen to more than 1.3 billion. And if you then include VAT, and as we've seen with so many projects recently in terms of roads, the possibility of a cost increasing even more than the contingency of about 150 million that the government has provided for, you can see that cost very easily increasing more. Indeed, Friends of the Earth have estimated in their evidence of inquiry that we're already closer to 1.8 billion. So, this is a mega project, isn't it? I don't think anyone can argue with that.
If in those terms, when we think of the possibility, we're already looking at way over 1.5 billion when you add in these different elements, then I think it is only right and proper, of course, that this Parliament will get the right to decide. Because, there's a huge opportunity cost in there. I mean, 1.5 billion, 1.7, 1.8 billion. You can have a new integrated transport system, a metro for Swansea Bay and the Western Valleys. Mark Barry has estimated £1 billion should do the first phase of that entire new regional transport system. You'd have some money to spare. Probably the estimates that have been suggested for the reopening of the Aberystwyth to Carmarthen railway line. You could do as well. You could have an entire new public transport system and reopen the railway line in West Wales instead of doing this. Now, there will be members, quite rightly, who think, actually, no, there is still, their assessment will be different, and they'll see cost-benefit different to my party. And, of course, that's within their right. The point of this motion, very simply, is that range of views needs to be heard and brought to bear on the final decision. Now, we've had debates, I think, in every assembly on the M4 Relief Road, partly reflecting the range of disagreement there is. The problem is, of course, they've been brought on opposition motions. And we've heard in recent weeks, of course, that the government doesn't always listen to the result of opposition debates. And so that's why this motion makes it clear that it should be brought forward on a government resolution so that it's a binding motion. And, you know, that is really standard practice for major infrastructure projects when we look at Westminster. If we look at some of the mega projects, where again there have been a range of views, sometimes within parties as well, HS2, the third runway in Heathrow, even the renovation project of the House of Commons, you could say. I mean, that's a major infrastructure project now, 5 billion. There have been votes on these issues, and of course that's absolutely vital in democracy. And in the process with the National Infrastructure Commission and the national policy statements in the UK is that there is a parliamentary vote. There is a parliamentary vote, as there should be. Certainly when we're talking about this level of expenditure. And so I hope that we will get support across the chamber, across the range of views in terms of what should happen after the end of the public inquiry with this particular project. I'll just say briefly about the government motion, which says that we shouldn't do anything to prejudice or prejudge the outcome of the public inquiry. The point of the motion is that we should have a vote after the public inquiry. You know, I mean, that doesn't prejudge we will then be informed by the outcome of the public inquiry, but ultimately it's parliaments that should decide, surely, on major policy decisions. And certainly when we're talking about the scale of the expenditure, the scale of the impact in other terms, in transport, environmental and social terms, then it should be right. It absolutely has to be right that it's this place that should make the final decision. And we'll be listening very, very carefully to what the government has to say on that matter.
Thank you. Can I now call Adam Price to reply to the debate?
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I was going to say halfway through the debate that I felt it was Parliament being at its best, because there were a range of views on this issue, but we were coalescing and uniting actually around the core principle that ultimately Parliament must decide. And I was hoping that the Cabinet Secretary, in his remarks at the end, would give us some clarity on that central issue. And yet I am completely unclear. I mean, he can intervene on me if he would like to, in reverse order to the intervention I made on him. He talked about having standalone votes on standalone projects, and then he went on to talk about some of the downsides of that if the precedent was set. I'm not quite clear still whether the precedent is going to be set. Is there a commitment to have a specific vote? It's not enough to have a vote on a supplementary budget. The supplementary budget could have a number of things in it. And then I know what would happen, because it's happened to me several times, Lee Waters, is I vote for one reason, but then the list of other things that are in the budget, I'm accused of being against. And you know, they're usually things that no one could possibly be against. Right? That's why we need to have a specific vote. Now, in relation to the point that Lee Waters raised, you know, if there are you know, lexicological problems with the motion, then I have the responsibility for that. I think the spirit of the motion is clear, though. What we were trying to do with the motion was say that the government could not go ahead with expenditure on the project before there was a vote on the principle following the public inquiry. I think that was clear to me. If it wasn't clear to other members, then I apologize for that, but I'm clarifying the intention, right? And you know, we don't live in a perfect world, and we certainly don't live in a perfect parliament. So if you want to actually vote in favor of the principle
of a vote on the principle, then this will be the only vote that you're going to get. Okay? And what I would say, and in all honesty, and delving deep into all the resources of charity in my soul, I would say to the member opposite, see beyond your antipathy, either to me or to my party, because there's a bigger issue here, which is beyond party. In fact, as Simon Thomas says, it's beyond generation, isn't it? It's intergenerational equity that we're talking about here. And so I would appeal to him. I know that he is absolutely sincere about the substantive issue, but in terms of ensuring that the government gives us all a vote, then this is our opportunity. Take it. Take it now. Take it tonight. We won't get another chance. This is it. The consensus that I heard in the contributions in the chamber from Andrew R.T. Davies, from other members, including Lee Waters, I believe. I mean, it's the figure of 2 billion. I think we all accept. I mean, there's a certain kind of inevitability about where we're going to end up. Jenny Rathbone, I think, in a very, very powerful contribution, pointed out that opportunity cost exists in all parts of Wales, doesn't it? I mean, Rhina Pagorweth referred to some of the relative underinvestment that there have been in some regions of Wales, but it is true. I mean, Mark Barry, in his initial assessment of the cost of the first phase of a metro, I mean, $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $2 billion would make a massive transformational effect for public transport in the southeast of Wales as well. And it's that opportunity cost calculation that we have to be able to bring to bear as individual members across our parties. And yes, Simon Thomas was right to say that we are, as a party, we have to reevaluate our own position in the light of the evidence that has been presented. So we place that on the record. We would urge members, I realise this is inherently difficult, and I really pay tribute to those members and the Labour benches that spoke very, very powerfully of the need for us to have a democratic vote, and primarily because, of course, of the doubt that you share, we share, about whether this represents true value for money, but also the truest values, the values that we want to enshrine in the future that we're trying to create for our country. Look, I realise that we all engage from time to time. It's an occupational flaw, maybe in knockabout, right? But there are some things which are more important. And if I, in any way, in any comments that I made, have clouded your judgment in that, then I would apologise, because there's been a lot of apologies in this chamber recently, and I'm prepared to make one as well, because this is more important than political theatre. This is more important than actually, winning or losing in that shallow sense. This is about the future of our country. And I think, what I'm heartened by the sense of consensus in this chamber that on these kind of decisions that were once made will impact upon generations to come, then we as a parliament, as parliamentarians, regardless of party, must insist that we get a vote. And I did invite the Cabinet Secretary, in the few seconds that I've got left, if he wants to get on his feet, if he wants to reassure us that we will get that vote, he can. But I'm afraid to say the silence speaks for itself. If you want to see that democratic vote, then use your vote tonight.
Thank you. The proposal is to agree the motion. Does any member object? Therefore, we defer voting on this item until voting time.